I'll get started.
All right, good evening. We're learning tonight Maseches Shekalim, the final blot of Maseches Shekalim. We're here at Mark Halpert's house, for those who are watching. I don't know if anybody shared this with their link. We have Mr. Shiur on the line.
He's invited here, by the way. Does you know that?
He is invited, he knows, yes.
Who's that?
So we're on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, starting at the final, almost the final Mishnah. 2 Mishnahs left, and let's get started. Says the Mishnah, the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, Halacha Gimel Matnises. Basar Koche Kachim Shenitma. What happens if meat in the Koche Kachim becomes tummy? If you'll recall, yesterday we spoke about the paroches becoming tummy, and what should we do if the paroches became tummy? So if meat in the Kodesh HaKodashim become tummy, we have to ask here as well. So the Mishnah gives a whole bunch of features. Bein be'av hatuma, bein bevlad hatuma, whether or not it became tummy with an av hatuma, the highest level of tuma, or bevlad hatuma, as discussed many times throughout Shas so far, the vlad hatuma, the child of tuma, namely, it's a rishon latuma. So if the meat became tummy with the avatuma or a rishon latuma, and second feature, bein bifnim, bein bachutz, whether or not it's in the Kodesh HaKodashim, it doesn't make a difference. In these cases, machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai omer makol yisaref bifnim, you burn it right there on the inside. Chutz mishenitma be'av hatuma bachutz. The only exception to the rule of burning it inside would be if it became tummy with an av hatuma bachutz. This is going to sound a little nuanced. When we get to the Gemara, it will be a little bit more clear. I sure hope so too. The last line of Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, Beis Hillel gives another shita. Beis Hillel omrim hakol yisaref bachutz. In that same case, you would actually burn the meat bachutz outside of the kodesh, except for the case of last few words on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, chutz mishenitma bevlad hatuma bifnim, unless it becomes tummy with a vlad hatuma, the sheni, the rishon latuma, and it were to have been inside. So that thank you. So that's shita number 2 in the Mishnah. Let's come to the shita number 3 in the Mishnah. Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, starting the final blot in the Masechta. Rabbi Lazar Omer shenitma be'av hatuma. If it becomes tummy with an av hatuma, then bein bifnim, bein bachutz, yisaref bachutz. Then we don't care whether the tuma occurred in the kodesh or not in the kodesh. The halacha is yisaref bachutz. It will be burned on the outside of the mikdash, and that's if it's all be'av hatuma. However, shenitma bevlad hatuma. If the meat became tummy with a vlad hatuma, with a rishon latuma, then bein bachutz, bein bifnim, yisaref bifnim. If the only tuma is that of a vlad hatuma, a rishon latuma, and not the av hatuma, then we'd say it's going to be, where does he say here? Is it bein bachutz, bein bifnim, yisaref bifnim? And that's shita number 3, that it'll be burned inside the kodesh. And the final shita of the Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva Omer, makom tumaso, sham sreifaso. He's much more simplistic. Wherever the tuma takes place, that's where the sreifa takes place. He removes the factor of whether or not it's av hatuma versus vlad hatuma, and he inherently removes the location, because wherever the tuma took place, that is where the I like the dog in the background. It's a nice touch. Very nice.
This wouldn't be.
His name is Peanut.
Yeah. Is it your dog?
No.
It was
Seriously. There has to be a challenge every time you give on-the-daf in Shekalim. There has to be something going on.
It's a Chihuahua.
Okay, it's a loud chihuahua.
It's like playing the Masters.
This dog is taking up too much of our time. Let's continue. Daf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, starting with the Gemara 4 lines down. The Gemara introduces a machlokes in the Amoraim as to what the status is of rishon latuma. Is a rishon latuma din d'oraisa or din d'rabbanan? So off the cuff, we probably would have assumed that a rishon latuma was d'rabbanan. Let's see from the Gemara machlokes in the Amoraim. Bar kapara amar av hatuma dvar Torah, vlad hatuma midivrehem. So what he's looking at is that an av hatuma is always a din d'oraisa, and that a rishon latuma, a vlad hatuma, is always d'rabbanan. Rav Yochanan argues. Rav Yochanan amar, either way, bein bazeh, bein bazeh, davar Torah. No, even a vlad hatuma, even a rishon latuma can even be a status of tuma midoraisa. And if this machlokes is true, so says the Gemara 6 lines down, Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. If this is true, the Gemara says, Vikashya no pressure at all, none. I don't feel any pressure right now. Vikashya dira. Oh, you can't talk, so I feel a little bit better now.
Obviously, that's a maturgum.
Says the Gemara 6 lines down, Vikashya to Rabbi Yochanan al Beis Shammai. The sheet of Rabbi Yochanan holds that both the avatuma and the rishon latuma are both midoraisa. Vikashya to Rabbi Yochanan al Beis Shammai. Because shitas Beis Shammai, what's the problem? To Beis Shammai omrim hakol yisaref bifnim chutz mishen nitma be'av hatuma bachutz. He made a distinction between that which was burned on the inside versus that which is burned on the outside. And what did he say? The one that was burned by the outside, that's if it's an av hatuma and it's bachutz under those circumstances. So then he says it's bachutz, but asks the Gemara, if Rav Yochanan makes no distinction between a vlad hatuma and an av hatuma, and both of them are tuma deoraisa, so asks the Gemara 8 lines down, ma bein av hatuma bachutz, ma bein vlad hatuma bachutz. They're both a status of a tuma deoraisa. Why then would Beis Shammai have made a distinction between them? Zev v'zeh lo davar Torah? Aren't both of them isuri deoraisa or tuma deoraisa, I should say? So therefore, why would Beis Shammai make a distinction between a vlad hatum and an av hatum if they're both deoraisa? Leave it be. Make it the same halacha. And then the Gemara continues, also still in question mode. Ve'afilu al Beis Shammai lo mikasha. You would still also have a question with Rabbi Yochanan's shita, even on within the opinion of Beis Hillel. How so? Because says the Gemara, the Beis Hillel Amar Hakol Yisarif Bachutz. Beis Hillel says everything in our Mishnah, when the meat becomes tamei from the Kodesh HaKodashim, will become tamei and it'll be burned bachutz. However, he makes an exception. Chutz of masha nitma bevlad hatuma bifnim. He makes a distinction between vlad hatuma and between avatuma, where the vlad hatuma gets burned on the inside and the avatuma is burned on the outside. So says the Gemara, that makes no sense. Ma bein vlad hatuma bifnim, ma bein avatuma bifnim. They're all deoraisa, according to Rav Yochanan, within the camp of Rav Yochanan, that the avatuma and the vlad hatuma, the avatuma and the rishon hatuma are all deoraisa. Why would Beis Hillel make a distinction between the two as to where the sreifa of this meat takes place? It's all the same halachic status. Zeh v'zeh, lo davar torahu. So says the Gemara, 1/3 of the way down on Chaf Beis Mad Aleph, lo havu barabanan ela al debar kapara. Really, what the Gemara means to say here is that we don't paskin like the Shita of Rav Yochanan. Our Mishnah is only within the frame of Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara holds that the Av Hatuma is Doraisa and the Vlad Hatuma or a Rishon Hatuma is Derabanan, and that solves all of the questions that we've asked on Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Because what we were bothered by is there is no difference between the Av Hatuma and the Vlad Hatuma. So says the Gemara, yes, there is, because we don't paskin like Rav Yochanan. We paskin like Bar Kapara. So says the Gemara, but if you hold like Bar Kapara, still the kasha the Bar Kapara al de Beis Shammai is still a problem of Shitas Bar Kapara and Beis Shammai. How so? Because the Beis Shammai omrim hakol yisaref bifnim chutz mishenitma be'avatuma bachutz. Beis Shammai makes an exclusion and says that the avatuma gets burned at the outside. Asks the Gemara, I don't understand. Ma bein avatuma bein bachutz bein bifnim. An avatuma inside or outside of the kodesh is still an avatuma. So why do you make such an exception? It makes no difference where you burn it. It's still an avatuma. Zeh v'zeh lo davar torahu. So says the Gemara, and now the Gemara is starting to paste things together. We saw 4 shitas in our Mishnah. Now we're going to see that there's really 2 streams of thought in our Mishnah and not 4. Says the Gemara, begin to Rabbi Akiva, Omar, Makom Tumaso, Sham Teisrefaso. No, the reason why Beis Shammai says that we make a distinction of chutz or pnim in regards to an av hatuma, you're right, of course. An avatuma is an avatuma. It's tamei midaraisa no matter what you do. The reason why we distinguish is because Beis Shammai is within the camp of our Mishnah of Rabbi Akiva, who says makom tumaso shamte sreifasa. So wherever it became tamei, that is where we burn it. And says the Gemara, ve'afilu al de Beis Shammai, 5 lines before the final Mishnah of the Masechta, ve'afilu al de Beis Hillel, ve'afilu al de Beis Hillel lo makasha. Within Bar Kapara, there's still a question on Beis Hillel too. What's the question? The Beis Hillel Amar Hakol Yisaref Bachutz Chutz Mi Shenitma Bevlad Hatuma Mi Bifnim. He also makes a distinction to say that where there's tumas of the Vlad Hatuma, so that's a Rishon Hatuma, and when that's Bifnim, it has a different halacha. So asks the Gemara, Ma Bein Vlad Hatuma, Bein Bifnim, Bein Bachutz. I don't understand. Why would Beis Hillel make such a distinction? Zeh v'zeh, lo medivreihem hu. Once we hold like Bar Kapara, and once we say that a Vlad Hatuma is derabanan, then who cares if it's burned inside or out? It's all Vlad Hatuma, it's all derabanan. So answers the Gemara, begin to Reb Shimon, because the Shita Beis Hillel in our Mishnah is following the camp of Reb Shimon from another area of halacha. Amar, what does he say? That when it comes to the Mitzorah, he is sent out of all 3 machanos, the machane Kohen, the machane Levi, and the machane Yisrael. He's sent out of all of them, and just like that is true, Beis Hillel wants to make sure that it is not going to be burned inside when we can avoid it. So therefore, if it's burned outside, that's where it's going to be burned, in line with Rabbi Shimon. Let's start the final Mishnah, middle of the page on Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. Halacha Daled Masnisan, Evarei HaTamid. We learned about this in Maseches Tamid. The limbs of the Korban Tamid after the animal has been shechted and cut into the appropriate pieces. Nisnen mechatzi kevesh ulemata b'ma'arov. Skipping the parentheses because we can prove this from Tamid that we know that the the body parts, the Evarim of the Tamid, go on the west side of the ramp going upwards. Shel Musafin, if there's a Korban Musaf on any particular day, like today, Shel Musafin, although we're going to specifically speak about Rosh Chodesh, a nice touch of Hashgacha that the Mishnah speaks about Rosh Chodesh. But first, let's talk about the Korban Musaf of a regular Shabbos or Yantav. Shel Musafin, Nisnin Mechatzi Kevesh, Ulemata B'Mizrach. It's put on the bottom half of the ramp on the eastern side. Shel Roshei Chodashim, Nisnin al Charkov Hamizbeach Milamala. And it goes on a little walkway that the Kohanim had up on top of the Mizbeach. We'll detail that in the Mishnah. And that's the end of the first part of the Mishnah. The second part of the Mishnah makes the distinction, which unfortunately is still true, about Bisman that the Beis HaMikdash is kaim and the Zman that it's not. And says the Gemara, we know, of course, that Hashkalim v'habikurim einan nohagin ela bifnei habayis. That the mitzvah of the whole Masechta, the name of the Masechta, the mitzvah of the Chasi Shekel, and coupled with it is the mitzvah of Bikurim, are only noheg bisman habayis. Aval, however, Meiser Dagan, bringing Meiser on grains, or Meiser Behema on animals, Ubichoros, which is different than Bikurim, don't mix them up. Bikurim is on vegetables and Bechoros are on animals. Bechoros noagin, Bein Bifnei Habayis, Bein Shelo Bifnei Habayis. They apply nowadays as well. And then says the Gemara, okay, but what if you actually were makdish that which you should not be makdish? So says the Mishnah, the last line of the Mishnah, 2/3 of the way down. Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, makdish shkalim uvikurim. What if one is makdish the shkalim and bikurim, the chatzi shekel and the bikurim, the fruits? So the Tanna Kama holds harei zeh kodesh. Afal pi that it's true that bisman shebeis hamikdash kaim you're chayev and bisman shebeis hamikdash eno kaim you're not chayev, but the mechanics of your commitment of the chatzi shekel actually works. So according to this Tana, if someone took right now a chatzi shekel and said, this is my chatzi shekel for the Beis HaMikdash, halacha l'maisa is hektish. It's hektish. It's treated to be as kodesh. That's an unbelievable concept in halacha, that without a Beis HaMikdash, that which is needed only for the Beis HaMikdash could have a status of hektish. However, Reb Shimon in our Mishnah, though we'll see a dissenting opinion of Reb Shimon in the Gemara, seemingly internally contradicting himself. Reb Shimon Omer ha'omer bikurim kodesh, einan kodesh. If someone says that bikurim are kodesh, so then they in fact are not kodesh. What does that imply? That if they say that about shkalim, that it is. So that we'll have to get into that shita momentarily. But first and quickly, the Gemara tries to answer the following question. Opening line of the Gemara, Ezu Charkov HaMizbeach. What is this reference to the Charkov of the Mizbeach? Answers the Gemara, Ama ben Karen lekeren. Between the corners of the Mizbeach, Makom Hiluch Ragle Kohanim, there was a square on the top of the Mizbeach where the Kohanim were able to walk. That is this particular space. The Gemara asks a question about preference of what one should do. Musafei Shabbos, Musafei Rosh Chodesh Mikodem. If you have a Musaf of Shabbos and you have a Musaf of Rosh Chodesh Mikodem, which korban comes first between the two Musafin? Let's say that it's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. What do? Which korban comes first? Rabbi Yirmiyah Savar Meimar. Rabbi Yirmiyah wanted to say Musafei Shabbos and Musafei Rosh Chodesh Kodmin. He wanted to say that the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh came first. Chayli de Rabbi Yirmiyah min Hada. Rabbi Yirmiyah wanted to support this shita from the following. What's the shita that he wants to prove? He wants to prove that Rosh Chodesh Korban comes first because Shiro Shel Shabbos v'Shiro Shel Rosh Chodesh. If you have the Shir Shel Yom of Shabbos or Rosh Chodesh, the halacha is Shiro Shel Rosh Chodesh Kodem. So we see that we have the preference of Rosh Chodesh in one area of the Shir. So too, we should probably assume the same by the Korban. So Amar Rabbi Yosa, that's not a good raya. You can't bring a raya from the Shir. Why? Because Amar Rabbi Yosa, Shanya hi taman. It's different over there. I'm just getting familiar with all the Yerushalmi language, and it's all going to disappear in about a day.
No, we should learn this deeper.
No, we should not. No, we should not. Shanya hi, another time. Okay, I'm sorry. I love Hashem and I love the Torah. We'll do it another time. Shanya hi taman. This is different because Amar Rabbi Chia b'shem Rabbi Yochanan kidei lefarsimo lehodia shu Rosh Chodesh. Why by the Shir did they do the Shir Shel Yom first? Because we were being Mekadesh HaChodesh Al Pi HaRe'iyah. We were looking up at the moon, and people would come in be'edus, and they would. Nobody was really sure when it was Rosh Chodesh until they made us think about it. Until by the times when they were doing the smoke, they were doing the smoke, and other times nowadays we would use technology. Nowadays we don't do Kiddush Al Pi HaRe'iyah anyways. So because they wanted to make a splash, so that's what they did by the Shir, but it's not a raya in regards to the Korban. Skipping most of the next line, one line down, Biram, however, Hacha Musvei Shabbos Musvei Rosh Chodesh Musvei Shabbos Kodmin. Why? Al Shem, Kol HaTadir Mechavero Kodem Eschavero. This sounds remotely familiar to what we've learned in Bavli of Tadir V'She'eno Tadir Kodem. The reason why Shabbos Korban comes first when you have two Korbanos Musafin, the reason why we bring the Korban Musaf of Shabbos before the Korban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh is because of Tadir. We know that Shabbos is more frequent, obviously, manyfold. It's more 4 times at least. Is more common than Rosh Chodesh, and therefore that is what the halacha would be. That when we have a korban musaf for Shabbos and for Rosh Chodesh, the halacha is we bring the one for Shabbos first. Let's get into the key sugya that's learned from our Mishnah, because the sugya we just learned was not really discussed in our Mishnah. But we were discussing the machlokas in the second half of our Mishnah about whether or not, if one is makdish shkalim, whether or not we would say that it's actually kodesh. So shkalim will be kurim, that's what it said in our Mishnah. And the second sheet of Reb Shimon said that if you do be kurim, it's einon kodesh, and the Gemara makes the diuk. Hashkalim kicha, but he says that if in fact it is the case, based on our Mishnah, based on Reb Shimon's understanding in our Mishnah, he seems to say that the shekel would taka be kodesh. So again, if a person took a chatzi shekel today and said, I want this to be kodesh, so then it would be considered kodesh. Afal pida, there's no Beis HaMikdash. But Reb Shimon ben Yehuda mishum Reb Shimon, this someone learned Reb Shimon differently. Reb Shimon presented himself in the Mishnah, but Reb Shimon ben Yehuda learned Reb Shimon. They're not the same Reb Shimon. You gotta hold cup. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda said in the name of Reb Shimon that that's not really what he held. That our Mishnah was a different version of Reb Shimon. Vein elu uvein elu lo kitchu. The second version of Reb Shimon holds that no, neither the bikurim or the shkalim are considered to be kodesh. The mechanics of you being mekadesh a shekel, a chatzi shekel, does not work. Tani says the Gemara. Wait 1 second. Ger bisman hazet tzarach lahavi kino. When a ger is megayer, he has to bring a kino, he has to bring a pair of birds. So the halacha is that bisman hazeh, he also has to be the financial equivalent, a quarter of a dinar of kesef. If this is true, halacha l'maisa, that's unbelievable. You have a ger coming into Beis Din, he does his gerus, and he brings a specific amount of silver in order to fulfill his obligations. Amar Reb Shimon, but Reb Shimon says, no, not allowed anymore. Bitla Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai mipnei takala. Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai says that afal pi that it's true that he should bring this quarter of a dinar of silver. We don't allow him to do so mipnei takala. What was the concern? Mahu mipnei takala. The concern was kehadad tani, like it says in the brisa. It says in the brisa in makdishin v'lo ma'arichen v'lo macharimen v'lo magbin trumos u'maisros bizman hazeh. The brisa writes that these are all different forms of committing things to the Beis HaMikdash, and we don't do any of them bizman hazeh. What does the Mishnah continue with? This brisa, v'im hikdish, 4 lines from the bottom, v'im hikdish oherich lo hecharim. Oh higbia, if you did one of these things, what does it seem to be? Did it work or did it not work? So let's see what the brisa concludes. Haksus tisaref, if it's clothes, if you dedicated clothes, you should burn them. Habehema te'aker, the animal should be seemingly killed. So the Gemara interjects, Ketzad, how do you kill this animal? We don't just kill animals for no good reason, and you're not allowed to shecht it because you can't eat it. Says the Gemara, Noel bifaneha hadelas v'himesa me'eleha. This animal needs to be killed. And the Brisa concludes again, V'hamos yelchu liyam hamelach. So what's implied from this Gemara? Avar v'hikdish, that it's implied that if taka you did it, it works. That the mechanics work to actually make it hektish. So says the Gemara, min ma de amar Reb Shimon bitla Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai mibnei takala. That which Reb Yochanan ben Zakkai said he was concerned about takala, and if you did it, then you have to burn this and you have to kill that animal. What does that show you about the things that you were makdish? That they're hektish. So says the Gemara, mibnei takala, that line that he taught us, hada amra avar v'hikdish kacho. It sounds like it actually does work. It sounds like it actually does work. So this new Reb Shimon that we saw in our Gemara seems to say it doesn't work, but a Brisa seems to say that it does. So how are we supposed to navigate this? Reb Yehuda Antudraya, Boy Kume Reb Yossi. Reb Yehuda from that city asked a question in front of Reb Yossi. Final turn of the page. Don't be sad. Final turn of the page.
Not for us yet.
It's very exciting. Says the Gemara, Hacha at Omar. Over here you seem to say Kitcho. Over here you seem to say in our Mishnah you seem to say that it's a kiddush, that it actually becomes hektish. V'hacha here by the ger at Omar lo Kitcho. You're saying that it's not work. It does work. We have all the brises that prove us otherwise. So says the Gemara as follows. Top line of Chav Beis and the base. Omar le Taman over there lekach ein makdishin lechatchila lefisha mitzvah lahakriv mitruma chadasha. The reason why there is a discussion in regards to the shekel and why Reb Shimon in the Gemara says that it's not mekudash is because it's mitzvah lahakriv mitruma chadasha. The Mishnah, the Masechta ends like the Masechta began, that we have the obligation to bring a chatzi shekel. We bring it on Aleph Adar so that on Aleph Nisan we can be mafresh from the Lishka in order to buy korbanos. It's mamish, it's a perfect cycle, the way that this Masechta concludes. And therefore, the coin that you bring now will not be chadash when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt. Even if you bring it today, it's not going to be a chadash. So therefore, the Rav Shimon that's quoted in the Gemara, not the one in our Mishnah, says it's not allowed. The Heach Havala Yashana, what are you going to do? You're going to bring an old coin? That's not appropriate. The Hacha, what are you going to say by the ger? Of course it's going to work. Who cares if the korban's old? it says Lagabe Hakdeshos Acherim Vikino Shelger Eno Tzarech Hadasha. He should be giving that money right now. That's why the Brisa says that he should be giving that money right. Okay, there's a concern. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai fine, so he won't give it. But Ladina, he really should. It's just we had some concerns, so therefore we're not going to. But there's no concern by the ger about Chadash versus not Chadash like there is about Shekalim. Therefore, V'im Hiktish, Hiktish. That's the distinction between the two Reb Shimons. The Gemara says, wait 1 second, just take the coins, take the Shekalim, dedicate them. If I want to dedicate a coin today, let me dedicate a coin today. When the Beis HaMikdash becomes rebuilt, relative to the Beis HaMikdash, it'll be chadash. What's the big deal? It'll be a new coin. So says the Gemara, Shema yibane habayis kibarishona. Maybe the Beis HaMikdash will be built like it was originally. V'sitram trumas halishka mina chadasha bizmana be'echad b'nisan. With the timing of the Beis HaMikdash being built in such a way where echad b'nisan takes place between the building of the Beis HaMikdash and actually bringing those first korbanos, chadash will be defined by Aleph Nisan. And you already gave your coin before the Beis HaMikdash was rebuilt. It doesn't work. The hachama islach. How do we paskin? How do we paskin? Says the Gemara, Rav Hamnuna v'Rav Ada bar Ava b'shem Rav halacha kireb Shimon, like our Mishnah that what? That the Shekalim are considered to actually be a kinyan. That's crazy town. This is what the Gemara seems to conclude with all of the concerns. It seems to be that we paskin like Reb Shimon, that really, if one is makdish a chatzi shekel, then it actually is going to work. Hopefully, we should have this be lemaisa, not just be conceptual. Hadron alach perakol harok and slikol Maseches Shekalim. Yitz Brandis, come over here and give a siyum.
I really think you should say it 3 times.
We're all going to say
At
it.
the end of Masech, I think you do.
Yeah, we're all going to do it, but I'll follow you. Do you want to use this or that? This?
That one's preferred.
You want a full size? Someone give a full size? Yeah.
You got enough light?
Yeah. Hadron Allah Maseches Shekalim b'Hadrach Alan. Daitach lo Maseches Shekalim b'Daitach Alan. By Mishnei Minach Maseches Shekalim b'La Nishnei Minan. La b'Omer Hadem, La b'Omer Kasich. Hadron Allah Maseches Shekalim b'Hadrach Alan. Daitach Allah Maseches Shekalim b'Daitach Alan. By Nishnei Minach Maseches Shekalim below Nishnei Minan. Lo b'Omer Hadem, Lo b'Omer Kasich. Hadron alach Maseches Shekalim b'Hadrach Alan. Daitach Alan Maseches Shekalim b'Daitach Alan. La Nishnei Minach Maseches Shekalim below Nishnei Minan. La ba'Omer Hadem below ba'Omer Ta'aseh. Yehira Tzayim L'Fanacha Adonai Eloheinu v'Lehei V'Seinu. Shetehei Torascha Umanu Seinu b'Olam Hazev Tehei Imanu l'Olam Haba. Hanina bar Papa, Roni bar Papa, Nachman bar Papa, Achai bar Papa, Abba Mari bar Papa, Rafan bar Papa, Rakish bar Papa, Surcha bar Papa, Ada bar Papa, Doru bar Papa. Arevna Adonai Eloheinu es divrei Sarascha bifinu ubitufios amcha beis Yisrael b'ni'ei anachnu v'tzatzaenu v'tzatzaei amcha beis Yisrael kulanu yodei shmacha v'lomdei Sarasacha lishma. Ayvai bechak meni mitzvosacha Hila olam hi libi kamim dechukacha laman lo evosh. The olam lo ashpach hikudatha hivam chisani. Baruch atah Adonai lamdeni chukacha amen 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 salah va'ed. Modim anachnu l'fanacha Adonai Eloheinu v'leher v'seinu shesamta chalkenu b'yoshvei beis hamidrash v'lo samta chalkenu b'yoshvei faranos. Anu mashkimim vehem mashkimim. Anu mashkimim l'divrei Torah vehem mashkimim l'dvarim batelim. Anu amelim vehem amelim. Anu amelim mekablim skar vehem amelim ve'ena mekablim skar. Anu ratzim vehem ratzim. Anu ratzim l'chaya olam haba vehem ratzim l've'er shachas. Shenamar ve'ata Elohim toridem l've'er shachas anshe damim mirma lo yachatzu yemehem v'ani avtach ba. Yehira Tzayim L'Fanacha Adonai Elohai Kashem She'az Tarni L'Sayim Maseches Shekalim Kain Ka'az Reini L'Haschil Masachtos Usfarim Acherim U'Lasayimam Lilmod L'Lamei L'Shmor Lasos L'Kaim Eskol Divrei Salmus Orazacha B'Ava V'Supus Kol HaTanayim Tamurayim V'Salmidei Chachamim Ya'amod Li U'Azari Shelo Samush HaTorah Mipi U'Mipi Zari V'Zera Zari Ad Olam. The Hiskayim V Behis halachacha tamka osach b'shachcha tishmar alacha v'hakitzosa hi tesichacha kivi yirbu yamacha v'yosifu lecha shnos chayim orech yamin v'yamina u'b'smola osher kavod Adonai Osh Lamuitim Shemay Baretz Iskadav Iskadash Merabah Yamadi Hu Asid Behis Hadata Ula Afaya Mesaya Ula Asaka Yishon Lafaya Olma Ula Lemivne Parta Dishlem Ula Shach Lala Hecha Begava Ula Ma'akar Holchana Nuchra'a min ara ula asava Polchana dishmaya la arse be'amlich kedusha brechu b'malchuse v'yikare b'chayechon uv'imechon b'chaye b'chol beis Yisrael ba'akala v'zman karev yimru amen. V'hama v'mei u'mayar yisparach v'yishtabach v'yispa'ar v'yisraman v'yisnansei v'yisadar v'yisalar v'yisalal shemei kibsha brechu. Le'ila mikol berchasa v'shirasa tishbachasa v'nachamasa damiram v'alma v'yimru amen. Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Talmidehon v'al kol Talmidehon v'al kol man da'askin b'oraisa v'yiv asra hadenu v'di kol asar v'asar. Yehei lahon l'cholon shalom rabba china v'chista v'rachamim v'chayin arichim v'zonei v'reviche v'rakana min kadam avuhon d'yishmaya v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba mishamaya v'chayim Tov Malenu Val Kol Yisrael B'Mru Amen. Amen. Shalom B'Mru Kuya B'Rachmat Yasser Shalom Malenu Val Kol Yisrael B'Mru Amen.
Everyone say hi. Simen Tov, yeah, Elanu, L'Chol Yisrael. Simen Tov, Mazel Tov, Simen Tov, Mazel Tov.